I can't do anything about what happened yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow. I think worry will make you sick.
Willie Nelson's life, while celebrated as one of country music's most enduring and beloved success stories, has been shadowed by loss, hardship, and controversy in ways that few beyond his inner circle truly grasp. Born amid the humble cotton fields of Abbott, Texas, Nelson rose from Dust Bowl-era poverty to pack stadiums and write songs that would uplift millions, but that journey exacted a steep toll. IRS seizures that stripped him of his ranch and prized recording studio, heartbreaking. Bereavements that stole away children and siblings, and decades of legal skirmishes that tested his resilience. Among his longest-running battles were his run-ins with the law over marijuana possession, a theme that wove itself through his life for more than 30 years, and became both a personal cause and a public emblem of his defiance against what he saw as unjust restrictions on personal liberty. His first arrest came in 1974 at age 41, when Dallas police stopped his car during a tour and discovered a small amount of cannabis, an incident he would later remember with bemusement, insisting he wasn't a criminal but simply a musician who liked to unwind. Yet that moment planted the seed of belief that cannabis use was a matter of freedom rather than felony. In early 1977, another brush with the law unfolded when Nelson and his songwriting partner Hank Cochran, arriving late for a flight to Bahamas, found their luggage delayed, and when it finally arrived in Nassau Customs, officers discovered marijuana tucked into a pair of Nelson's jeans, leading to his brief jailing on suspicion of possession. Cochran, in a show of loyalty, even smuggled in a six-pack of beer to raise his friend's spirits. And when the charges were dropped after stern warning never to return, Nelson, ever irreverent, joked that he would gladly go back just to play one more set. For almost 20 years, he managed to avoid major incidents until February 1994, when after driving through the Texas night, he pulled over near Waco to sleep and was discovered slumped over the wheel by a highway patrolman who, during a routine check, found a small stash of marijuana in the car. This court date forced Nelson to skip that year's Grammy Awards, prompting his dry observation that he had traded a shot at a gold trophy for an afternoon nap. Another high-profile episode followed in April 2006, when Nelson, en route to the funeral of former Texas governor, and Richards with his manager and sister, Bobby, was stopped in St. Martin Parish, Louisiana, where authorities discovered marijuana and hallucinogenic mushrooms aboard his tour bus. All three passengers were charged, and Nelson was handed 6 months probation, which he accepted with his characteristic mix of resignation and humor, noting in his journal that it meant half a year of watching his back and 6 reminders that the law still lagged behind his views on liberty. Perhaps the most theatrical of these encounters came on November 26, 2010, in Sierra Blanca, Texas, where border inspection agents boarded his bus and confiscated 6 ounces of marijuana, setting bail at $2,500, which Nelson promptly paid. In court, the prosecutor jokingly suggested that Nelson sing Blue Eyes Cry in the Rain for the judge as part of his sentence, but the judge dismissed the idea, noting her courtroom was for justice, not karaoke. Nelson ultimately agreed to a plea deal involving a $500 fine, avoiding a possible 2-year sentence, though the judge later voiced unease that his fame had spared him harsher punishment. Yet Nelson met each of these incidents with unwavering resolve, telling a 2015 benefit crowd that he'd been jailed more often for a little green than most people were for a gun, and that he would do it again if it meant defending what he believed. He wove these legal tangles into his art and activism, his oft-repeated line, "If my eyes are red, that's my business, not the laws," becoming a rallying cry for reform. As the nation's stance on cannabis slowly evolved, but marijuana arrests were far from his only trial. In early 1990, Nelson awoke to find the IRS had moved to collect a tax that it claimed had swelled to $32 million, seizing his beloved Luck Ranch, his state-of-the-art recording studio, a treasured collection of vintage guitars, and scores of personal belongings, an upheaval that traced back to 1978 when, after parting ways with his manager Neil Reshen, Nelson hired attorney Terry Bray, who brought in Price Waterhouse to advise on aggressive tax shelters that were later deemed illegitimate. Between 1980 and 1982, as Nelson's income soared from best-selling albums and sold-out tours, the IRS disallowed his deductions, levied penalties, and let interest snowball until the debt became overwhelming. With his possessions slated for auction, Lawyer Jay Goldberg negotiated the bill down to $16 million. But even that was far beyond Nelson's immediate means, prompting an unusual agreement with the IRS. He would record an album to raise funds. The result was a 1992 release, Who Will Buy My Memories, a stripped-down 2-disc set of voice and guitar revisiting songs from across his career, which Nelson never imagined would be sold to pay taxes. The IRS estimated it needed to sell 4 million copies to clear the debt, and while sales of 3.6 million by the end of 1993 fell short, they still raised $3.6 million. To bridge the remaining gap, Nelson relied on behind-the-scenes negotiations, a lawsuit against Price Waterhouse that yielded an undisclosed settlement, and the generosity of friends and fans who quietly bought his auction belongings and returned them to him for token amounts. By the end of 1993, the debt was fully settled, and Nelson reflected with pragmatic calm, saying that once the IRS took what they wanted that first day, they left him alone, and he appreciated not being hounded night after night. The ordeal left him more cautious. He regained control of his publishing rights, managed his finances with greater care, and urged other artists to keep your own books, while steadily reclaiming his ranch, rebuilding his guitar collection, and resuming a full touring schedule, joking from the stage that he had lost everything but gotten it all back: one guitar, one song, one show at a time. Yet even as he overcame legal and financial crises, tragedy struck repeatedly in his personal life. In December 1983, his mother, Merle Marie Greenhall, later Harvey, died of cancer at 70, a loss Nelson likened to being set adrift in a storm without a shore, as she had been first to nurture his love of music. 8 years later, on Christmas Day 1991, his son William Billy Hugh Nelson Jr., aged 33, took his own life in a Tennessee cabin, a blow Nelson called the most devastating moment of his life, compounded by memories of his own past despair when, as he revealed in his 2022 memoir, Me and Paul, he once lay on railroad tracks contemplating suicide. In Billy's memory, Nelson completed the gospel album they had begun together, 1994's Peace in the Valley, which included their duet, My Body's Just a Suitcase of My Soul, a process producer Bob McDonald Jr. described as emotionally grueling, but ultimately healing for Nelson. In 2012, another emotional chapter unfolded when Nelson learned he had unknowingly fathered a daughter, Linda Renee Barley, in 1953 with Mary Haney. Renee, a Houston-based graphic designer with a daughter and granddaughter, embraced a newfound relationship, and Nelson celebrated Father's Day with her. But in August 2017, she died unexpectedly at 64, a loss that left him stunned, saying he never imagined losing someone he had only just found. In March 2022 came the death of his sister and musical partner, Bobby Lee Nelson, aged 91, who had taught herself piano in their Abbott childhood home and performed alongside him for more than 5 decades. Her passing, after their final shared concert in October 2021, left him without the person he called the heartbeat of his music. Through each loss, Nelson met grief head-on, finding solace in music, writing songs after his mother's passing, turning to gospel after Billy's death, cherishing new family connections after Renee's, and honoring Bobby's legacy in every performance. Quoting often the Mexican proverb, "To live in hearts we leave behind is not to die," he carried their memories forward on stage and in song. By 2025, at age 90, Nelson remains an active touring artist, crediting music with saving him countless times, binding him to others even in loss, and serving as a vessel through which the spirits of those he loved endure, from poverty to fame, from legal persecution to financial ruin and recovery, from unbearable personal losses to the joy of reunion and the pain of farewell. Nelson's story is a testament to steadfast conviction, ingenuity, community, and a belief that personal freedom is the greatest encore of all. His life a melody shaped as much by its shadows as its light, each note carrying the weight of memory, resilience, and the will to keep singing. Nelson's resilience is all the more remarkable when you consider the sheer scope of what he has navigated, because behind the public image of a soft-spoken troubadour with braided hair and a weathered guitar lies a man who has been forced to reinvent himself repeatedly in the face of setbacks that might have ended another career entirely. His deep connection to music began almost before he could talk. Born in 1933, raised largely by his grandparents in a small Texas town that bore the weight of the Depression, and the tail end of the Dust Bowl, he learned early that art could be both escape and survival. With his first guitar arriving when he was just 6 years old, its strings offering a voice when words seemed inadequate. As a boy, he picked cotton alongside his family, absorbing not only the rhythms of labor but also the hymns and ballads sung in the fields and church pews, seeds that would later bloom into a genre-blending style, fusing country, folk, jazz, blues, and gospel. By the time he was a teenager, Nelson was performing in local dance halls, writing songs between farm chores, and honing a lyrical honesty that would define his career. His early years in Nashville in the 1960s brought songwriting breakthroughs, penning hits like Crazy for Patsy Cline and Hello Walls for Fair and Young, but also frustration with the industry's rigid formulas, which clashed with his instinct for raw, stripped-down storytelling. Moving back to Texas in the early 1970s, he became a central figure in the outlaw country movement, which rejected the polished Nashville sound in favor of authenticity and artistic independence, a stance that would later echo in his refusal to bow to marijuana laws he considered unjust. The years that followed were a whirlwind of creative output and relentless touring, his album sales climbing, his concerts turning into communal celebrations where fans felt less like an audience and more like part of family. Yet fame brought new challenges, from business entanglements that would later feed into his IRS troubles to the inevitable strain on personal relationships, and Nelson's life became a balancing act between the joy of creation and the weight of responsibility. His connection to marijuana, for example, was never just recreational. It became part of his identity, a symbol of rebellion and personal sovereignty, which is why every arrest over the years only seemed to strengthen his resolve rather than diminish it. He saw these incidents not as humiliations, but as opportunities to challenge outdated laws, often meeting court appearances with humor that disarmed his critics. Even the 2010 Sierra Blanca arrest, which could have resulted in serious prison time, became fodder for his public persona, further cementing his place as both a musical and cultural icon willing to stand his ground. But if his defiance in the face of legal jeopardy showed one side of his character, his handling of the IRS debacle revealed another. The pragmatist who could find unconventional solutions when backed into a corner, as in the creation of Who Will Buy My Memories, which not only helped settle his debt, but also stood as a stark, unvarnished musical memoir. That project, built on nothing more than his voice and guitar, reminded fans of the intimate core of his artistry, free from production gloss. And in a way, the IRS had unwittingly prompted him to create one of his most vulnerable and enduring works. Friends and strangers alike rallied to his aid, buying back guitars and studio gear at auction only to return them, a testament to the loyalty he inspired and the deep emotional bond between Nelson and his audience. By the mid-1990s, with his ranch reclaimed and his finances stabilized, he resumed touring with the same vigor as before, his setlist now carrying the subtext of survival and redemption. Personal losses, however, would test him in ways no financial or legal struggle could, each one chiseling away at the inner circle that had anchored him since childhood. The death of his mother in 1983 removed a figure he described as steady as a lighthouse, and her absence deepened his appreciation for family connections, even as life on the road often kept him physically distant. Billie's suicide in 1991 was an earthquake from which he would never fully recover, forcing him to confront his own history with depression, while also transforming his music in subtle ways. Songs took on new layers of spiritual searching, and gospel projects became both a tribute and a coping mechanism. His completion of their joint album was not just a professional duty, but an act of mourning, an effort to give Billie's voice a permanence it could not have. In life, the discovery of Renee in 2012 brought unexpected joy and a late-in-life expansion of his family tree. And though their time together was short, it was marked by shared holidays, conversations about the past, and the bittersweet knowledge of what had been missed. Her sudden passing in 2017 reopened wounds, and yet Nelson's response, standing beside her daughter at the funeral, promising to honor her memory, was another quiet act of endurance. Bobby Lee's death in 2022 was perhaps the most profound of his later years, because she had been with him through every phase of his career. Her piano playing as integral to his sound as his own guitar, her presence on stage a constant reminder of the roots they shared. Their final performance together just months before her passing now stands as a poignant farewell, a last embodiment of a musical partnership that had spanned more than half a century. Through all these losses, Nelson clung to music, not just as a profession, but as a lifeline. Quoting often the saying that to live in hearts we leave behind is not to die, and ensuring that each concert became a kind of living memorial for those he had lost. Even at 90, his touring schedule remains intense by any standard, a testament to his stamina and his refusal to retreat into nostalgia. His shows are not museum pieces, but living, breathing conversations with the audience, each song a bridge between past and present. When asked what keeps him going, Nelson often cites the simple fact that music has saved him more times than I can count, binding together the joys and sorrows of his life into something he can share. In a culture quick to move on from its icons, his continued presence on the road is a reminder that endurance itself can be a form of artistry, and that a life marked by mistakes, losses, and controversies can still be one of joy, generosity, and unshakable conviction. His legacy is more than the hundreds of songs he has written or the awards he has collected. It is in the way he has turned adversity into art, in his steadfast defense of personal freedom, and in the quiet dignity with which he has carried his grief. Each note he plays is a thread in a vast tapestry woven from resilience, rebellion, humor, and heart, a story that, like the man himself, refuses to be neatly resolved, always moving forward, one song, one stage, one memory at a time.